The massive space station floated in the cold darkness above Kepler Prime like a metal moon. Inside its bright halls, creatures from 47 different worlds sat in their special chairs and breathing tanks, all watching the same terrible pictures on the big screens. The pictures showed black ships moving through space like hungry insects, eating everything they touched. Admiral Tae-min stood at the front of the great chamber, his blue skin pale with worry. His people had fought wars for 1,000 years, but nothing like this. The screens showed numbers that made his stomach hurt. 12 star systems were gone, just gone. Billions of people dead. Their best ships destroyed like toys. "The Void Swarm has returned," Tae-min said, his voice carrying through the translation devices to every creature in the room. "After sleeping for 10,000 years, they are awake and hungry again." The alien representatives shifted nervously in their seats. Some had tentacles that curled with fear. Others had shells that clicked together in anxiety. All of them understood what these black ships meant. The Void Swarm was not just an enemy. It was the end of everything. Commander Veltar of the crystalline hegemony rose from her crystal chair, her body glowing with angry light. Her people could crack planets in half with their weapons, but even they had lost ships to these black monsters. "Our reality anchor cannons cannot touch them," she said. "Their hulls bend space itself. Our strongest weapons pass through them like they are not even there." A creature that looked like a giant spider spoke next, its voice buzzing through the translator. "The Rockborn sent 50 dreadnoughts. Only 3 came back. The enemy adapts to everything we throw at them." More voices joined in, each telling the same story. The most powerful civilizations in the galaxy had thrown their best weapons at the Void Swarm, and all had failed. The black ships learned from every attack, growing stronger with each battle. "We need more ships," Admiral Tae-min said. "Every world, every fleet. If we do not stop them here, they will consume the entire galaxy." One by one, the alien powers responded. The Zephyrians promised their carrier fleets with 1,000,000 fighter craft. The Ethereal Collective offered their mind warriors who could kill with thoughts alone. The Silicon Lords would bring their city-sized battleships. Fleet after fleet, from every corner of known space. Then came Earth's response. Ambassador Hairi Kim sat quietly in the human section, her small figure almost lost among the giant aliens around her. When the call reached her homeworld, she waited for the answer like everyone else. Humans were new to the galaxy, barely 50 years since first contact. Their technology was simple compared to the others. Their ships were small and crude. The message came back quickly, too quickly. Hairi stood and activated her speaking device. "Earth acknowledges the threat," she said in her calm voice. "One ship is coming." The great chamber fell silent. Even the constant humming of life support systems seemed to stop. 47 species stared at the small human woman as if she had spoken in a dead language. "Did the translation work correctly?" asked a floating jellyfish creature. "Did Earth say one ship?" "Yes," Hairi replied simply. The silence broke into a storm of noise. Creatures roared, buzzed, clicked, and sang their disbelief. How could the humans send only one ship when the greatest powers in the galaxy were sending thousands? Admiral Tae-min raised his hand for quiet. "Ambassador Kim, perhaps Earth did not understand the size of this threat. We are facing an enemy that has destroyed entire civilizations. One ship will not even slow them down." Hairi looked around the chamber at all the worried faces and strange eyes staring at her. She had sat in meetings like this before, watching. Aliens underestimate humanity. They saw humans as weak because their ships were made of simple metal instead of exotic matter. They thought humans were primitive because they used chemical rockets instead of quantum drives. "Earth understands," she said. "Captain Jin-Woo Park will command the ship. It is called the Indomitable. One ship, repeated Commander Veltar, her crystal body dimming with what might have been pity. "Against an enemy that destroyed 3,000 of our finest vessels." The other representatives began to whisper among themselves. Some felt sorry for the brave but foolish humans. Others wondered if Earth was abandoning the fight entirely. Why send one ship when you could send nothing and achieve the same result? But Hayri knew something they did not. She had seen the files, marked with the highest security levels. She had walked through the shipyards where the Indomitable was built. She knew what humanity had learned from studying every battle, every defeat, every failure of the past 50 years. The galaxy's civilizations had grown soft with their advanced technology. They built elegant weapons that used clean energy and sophisticated targeting systems. They fought wars like it was an art form with rules and honor and proper procedures. Humanity had learned war on a world where everything wanted to kill them. They had fought with sticks and stones, then bronze and iron, then gunpowder and steel. They understood that sometimes the best way to solve a problem was not with elegant technology, but with a very big hammer. As the meeting broke up and the alien representatives returned to their ships, Hayri remained in her seat. She thought about Captain Park, somewhere in space right now, flying toward certain death. At least that was what everyone else thought. She remembered the day the Indomitable had launched from Earth's orbital shipyard. It looked different from other human ships, heavier, darker. Its hull was thick metal instead of the light alloys most ships used. Its weapons were hidden behind armored covers. When asked about the strange design, the engineers had just smiled and said it was built for a special purpose. That purpose was about to be tested. The Void Swarm had never faced humanity before. They had adapted to energy weapons and exotic matter, bombs. They had learned to counter quantum disruptors and reality anchors. Their black hulls could turn aside the most sophisticated attacks in the galaxy, but they had never been shot with a cannon. 3 days later, Admiral Taemin received a message that made his blood run cold. The combined fleet of 3,000 ships had engaged the Void Swarm at the Nexus defense line. The battle had lasted 6 hours. When it was over, fewer than 200 ships remained. The Void Swarm was coming, and now nothing stood in their way except one small ship from a world. Called Earth, Taemin looked at the star maps showing the enemy's advance. In 2 weeks, they would reach the core systems where billions of innocent people lived. He began preparing evacuation orders, knowing that even if every civilian ship in the galaxy worked day and night, they could not save everyone. Somewhere, in the darkness between the stars, Captain Jinwoo Park and his crew of 50 humans flew toward the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever known. They carried no exotic weapons, no reality-bending technology, no quantum computers that could think faster than light. They carried something else entirely, something the galaxy was about to remember, even though it had tried very hard to forget. The Indomitable moved through hyperspace like a metal shark swimming through dark water. Its hull was not pretty like the alien ships with their smooth curves and glowing lights. Instead, it looked like what it was, a weapon built by people who understood that war was not beautiful. Captain Jinwoo Park stood on the bridge watching the stars blur past the thick windows. His face showed the lines of a man who had spent 30 years learning how to fight. His uniform was simple gray cloth, not the fancy materials other species used. Everything about him and his ship spoke of function over form. "How long until we reach the battle zone?" he asked without turning around. Lieutenant Commander So Young checked her instruments, her fingers moving quickly over controls that would have seemed primitive to any alien engineer. No holographic displays or thought-controlled interfaces here, just solid buttons and switches that would work even if the power failed. 18 hours at current speed, she reported. The hyperspace distortions from the battle are making navigation difficult. Whatever weapons they used, they tore holes in space itself. Park nodded grimly. The reports from the front were getting worse every hour. The combined fleet had thrown everything they had at the Void Swarm. planet-killer weapons, reality bombs, quantum torpedoes that existed in 7 dimensions at once. All of it had failed. Chief Engineer Dong Hyuk climbed up from the lower decks, his hands stained with oil and his uniform torn in 3 places. Unlike the clean, automated ships of other species, the Indomitable required constant human attention. Every system had backup systems, and those had backup systems too. The main drives are running at 100%, he reported. Fusion reactors are stable. The special systems are charged and ready. Those special systems were what made this ship different from every other vessel in human space. Park had seen the plans, had watched them being built, had signed the orders that made this mission possible. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived on a world where everything from the weather to the wildlife had tried to kill them for millions of years. Dr. Min Jun sat at his science station, studying the intercepted transmissions from the defeated alien fleet. His job was to understand the enemy, to find their weaknesses, to learn how humanity could succeed where others had failed. The Void Swarm ships are remarkable, he said, not looking up from his screens. Their hulls are made of some kind of programmable matter that can adapt to any attack. Energy weapons heat them up so they become heat-resistant. Kinetic weapons hit them so they become harder. It is like fighting an enemy that learns from every punch. "What about their weapons?" asked Park. "Reality distortion beams," Min Jun replied. "They break down matter at the quantum level. Very efficient, very clean. The target simply stops existing." Park smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Clean, efficient, elegant. He spat the words like curses. The galaxy has forgotten what real war looks like. The Indomitable continued its journey through the twisted space between stars, passing the wreckage of civilizations that had stood for thousands of years. Entire star systems had been consumed, their matter converted into more Void Swarm ships. The enemy grew stronger with every victory. Tactical Officer Yan Su monitored the long-range sensors, watching for any sign of enemy activity. Her station was surrounded by screens showing energy readings, mass detectors, and gravitational anomaly warnings. All of it painted the same picture. The Void Swarm was spreading like a disease through the galaxy. "Captain," she called out, "I am picking up debris fields from the main battle, large ones." The bridge crew gathered around her station as the sensor readings resolved into a clear picture. Where the mighty Galactic fleet had made its stand, now only scattered wreckage remained. Pieces of ships that had been larger than cities drifted. In the void, their hulls twisted into impossible shapes by weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. "Any survivors?" Park asked. "A few escape pods? Maybe a dozen ships limping away from the battle zone? Out of 3,000, the silence on the bridge was heavy with the weight of those numbers. 3,000 ships, crewed by the best warriors in the galaxy, armed with weapons that could destroy planets, had been swept aside like dust in a storm. Communications Specialist. Kyung-ho suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Taemin's flagship. Audio only. Their visual systems are damaged." The voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with pain. "This is Admiral Taemin to any ships in the area. The Nexus defense line has fallen. The enemy is advancing toward the core systems. All available ships should evacuate civilian populations immediately." Park activated the reply circuit. "Admiral, this is Captain Park of the Indomitable. What is your status?" A long pause, then the Admiral's voice returned, stronger now with surprise. "Captain Park, you should not be here. The battle is over. We lost everything." "The battle is over. When?" "I say it is over," Park replied calmly. "What can you tell me about enemy capabilities?" "Their ships adapt to everything we throw at them. Our best weapons become useless after the first few hits. They learn, Captain. They evolve. Nothing we have can touch them anymore." "I understand. Evacuate your remaining ships to the core systems. We will handle this." Another long pause. "Captain, with respect, you have one ship. The swarm has thousands. You cannot possibly— Admiral, Park interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had never retreated from a fight. Humans have been handling impossible odds since we learned to walk upright. This is just another day at the office. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Outside the thick windows, space looked empty and peaceful. But Park knew that somewhere ahead of them, an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen was preparing to consume everything in its path. Weapons Officer Ji-hoon spoke from his station near the back of the bridge. "Captain, should I begin targeting practice with the main batteries?" "Not yet," Park replied. "Let them think we are just another alien ship with energy weapons and exotic matter bombs. Let them prepare their usual defenses." Ji-hoon smiled, understanding the plan. "Yes, sir. They are going to get quite a surprise." Medical Officer Yun-ji emerged from the ship's medical bay, carrying a tablet with crew status reports. "All hands are healthy and ready for combat. I have prepared the emergency medical stations for heavy casualties." Park nodded. The Indomitable carried only 50 people, but each one was a volunteer who understood the risks. They had trained for this mission for 2 years, learning to operate systems that pushed the boundaries of what human engineering could achieve. As the ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the battle zone, the crew took their positions for what might be the last battle any of them would ever fight. The sensors immediately detected the Void Swarm's main fleet, a dark cloud of geometric ships that seemed to absorb light itself. "Enemy contact," Yonsu reported. "Estimated strength, 4,000 vessels. They have detected us and are moving to intercept." Park settled into his command chair, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had prepared for this moment their entire lives. "All stations report ready," So-young announced. "Engineering reports all systems optimal," added Dong-hyuk. "Weapons are loaded and ready," confirmed Ji-hoon. Park looked at the advancing enemy fleet on the main screen. Each ship was larger than his vessel, equipped with technology that could rewrite reality itself. They had never been defeated, never even been seriously challenged. "Take us in," he ordered quietly. The surviving alien commanders gathered in virtual space, their broken ships linked by quantum communication arrays that flickered with damage. Admiral Taemin's once proud flagship looked like a twisted piece of metal, its hull cracked open in a dozen places. Half his crew was dead, and the other half worked desperately to keep life support running. "Status report," he said, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. Commander Veltar's crystal form appeared as a dim hologram, her usual bright glow reduced to barely visible light. "The crystalline hegemony has lost 90% of our fleet. Our reality anchor weapons were useless. The enemy adapted to them within minutes." The spider-like rock-born commander's image buzzed with static as his damaged transmitter struggled to maintain connection. 50 dreadnoughts became 5. Our strongest armor, our heaviest weapons, nothing worked. They learned from every shot we fired. One by one, the reports came in from the shattered remains of the Galactic fleet. The elegant weapons that had maintained peace for 1,000 years had proven worthless against an enemy that could adapt to anything they threw at it. Energy beams, exotic matter bombs, quantum disruptors, all had failed after the first few successful hits. "The enemy is advancing toward the core systems," Admiral Taemin announced. "At their current speed, they will reach Andorian Prime in 6 days. We must begin evacuating the civilian populations." "With what ships?" asked Commander Veltar bitterly. "We lost everything." It was then that Captain Park's transmission cut through their despair like a knife through silk. "This is the Indomitable requesting permission to engage the enemy." The alien commanders stared at each other in disbelief. Somehow, in the chaos of their total defeat, they had forgotten about the single human ship. Captain Park, Admiral Taemin, said carefully, "You should retreat to the core systems, help with the evacuation. There is nothing you can do here." "Negative," Park replied with the calm certainty of a man who had made his decision long ago. "The Indomitable is moving to attack position." "Captain, please listen to reason." Commander Veltar's crystal form flickered with what might have been desperation. "We had 3,000 ships, the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The enemy destroyed us in 6 hours. What can one human ship possibly accomplish?" Park's response was simple and direct. "We can try." The communication ended, leaving the alien commanders in stunned silence. Through their damaged sensors, they watched the Indomitable accelerate toward the Void Swarm's main formation. The human ship looked so small against the dark cloud of enemy vessels, like a single spark flying toward an ocean of night. Aboard the Indomitable, the crew prepared for battle with the methodical efficiency that humans had learned from centuries of warfare. Unlike the aliens with their automated systems and AI assistants, every action required human hands and human judgment. Tactical Officer Yeon Su reported the enemy's response to their approach. "Swarm ships are moving to intercept. I count 50 vessels breaking off from the main formation. They are scanning us with multiple sensor types." "Let them look," Captain Park said from his command chair. "What did they see?" Dr. Minjun studied. The enemy scan patterns on his science station. "Standard energy weapon signatures, basic fusion reactors, simple metal hull construction. They are classifying us as a primitive threat, similar to early Zephyrian designs." "Good," Park nodded. "They will prepare the same defenses that worked against the others." Chief Engineer Dong Hyuk's voice came through the internal communication system from deep in the ship's engine room. "All systems are ready, Captain. The special modifications are charged and standing by." Those special modifications were the result of 50 years of human observation and learning. While other species had focused on making their weapons more elegant and efficient, humans had studied every battle, every defeat, every successful tactic used throughout galactic history. The conclusion they had reached was simple. The galaxy had forgotten how to fight dirty. Weapons Officer Ji-hoon ran his final checks on the ship's armament. To any alien observer, the Indomitable appeared to carry standard energy weapons, plasma cannons, particle beams, the usual assortment of civilized warfare tools. But hidden behind armored covers along the ship's hull were weapons that no other species would dream of building. "Enemy ships are coming into range," Yeon-su announced. "They are charging their reality distortion weapons." The first Void Swarm vessels opened fire, their beams designed to unmake matter at the quantum level. The attacks that had destroyed the galaxy's mightiest dreadnoughts struck the Indomitable's hull and did very little. Hull breach on deck. 7, reported damage control specialist Kyung-ho. "Minor structural damage. Emergency bulkheads are holding." The alien commanders watching from their crippled ships could not believe what they were seeing. The reality distortion beams that had torn through exotic matter armor like tissue paper were barely scratching the human ship's crude metal hull. "How is that possible?" Commander Veltar whispered. Dr. Min-jun provided the answer as he monitored the enemy's confused scan attempts. "They are trying to disrupt our hull at the quantum level, but our armor is just steel and titanium. Simple matter. No exotic particles to manipulate, no quantum field generators to overload. Their weapons are designed to counter sophisticated defenses." The Void Swarm ships moved closer, their adaptive systems working to understand this new type of target. More weapons fired, reality distortion beams joined by gravity manipulators and space-time distortion cannons. The Indomitable shook under the impacts, but continued its steady advance. "Hull integrity at 85%, Kyung-ho reported. "We are taking damage, but nothing critical." Captain Park watched the range counter tick down as his ship closed with the enemy. 50 Void Swarm vessels surrounded them now, their black hulls gleaming with the energy of weapons that could reshape reality itself. They had adapted their defenses based on the scanning data, preparing for the standard energy weapon assault that every other species used. "Range to optimal firing distance?" he asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing, Ji-hoon replied from his weapons station. "Enemy shields are configured for energy weapon defense," Yeon-soo added. "Their adaptive armor is prepared for plasma and particle beam attacks." Park smiled, and it was the expression of a predator about to strike. "They have no idea what is coming." At 1,500 kilometers, the Void Swarm ships opened fire with everything they had: reality distortion beams, quantum disruptors, space-time, manipulation weapons. The full arsenal of the galaxy's most feared enemy. The attacks lit up space around the Indomitable like a deadly fireworks display. The human ship flew straight through it all. 1,000 kilometers, Ji-hoon announced. 500 kilometers. Optimal range achieved. Captain Park looked around his bridge at the crew who had volunteered for what everyone thought was a suicide mission. These 50 humans represented the best of their species: warriors, engineers, scientists, and healers, united by the simple belief that sometimes you have to stand up and fight, even when the odds are impossible. "All batteries," he said quietly, "commence firing." The Indomitable's hull erupted in thunder. What emerged from the hidden weapon ports were not energy beams or exotic particles. They were shells, massive chunks of metal accelerated to tremendous speeds by electromagnetic rails. Hundreds of them, each one weighing several tons, each one moving fast enough to punch through a mountain. The Void Swarm's adaptive shields, perfectly configured to stop energy weapons, proved completely useless against simple kinetic force. The first shells struck their targets and kept going, punching through hulls that had turned aside reality-warping attacks with ease. Secondary explosions rippled through the enemy formation as the shells found fuel lines, power cores, and ammunition. Storage. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before began to break apart under the devastating impact of basic physics applied with overwhelming force. "Target the command vessel," Park ordered as his ship's weapons continued their relentless barrage. Ji-hoon adjusted his aim, sending a concentrated stream of shells toward the largest enemy ship. The massive projectiles struck its hull like the fist of an angry god, tearing through exotic matter armor as if it were paper. The galaxy watched in amazement as the impossible happened. The Void Swarm, the unstoppable enemy that had consumed. Entire civilizations began to die under a rain of simple metal projectiles fired by a species that still used gunpowder in some of their weapons. The electromagnetic rails along the Indomitable's hull screamed as they fired shell after shell into the heart of the Void Swarm formation. Each projectile was a work of human engineering, dense metal cores wrapped in reactive casings designed, not to be elegant, but to transfer the maximum amount of kinetic energy to whatever they hit. The enemy ships that had seemed so invincible moments before now burned and twisted in the vacuum of space. Their adaptive armor, programmed to counter every known weapon in the galaxy, had no defense against simple mass moving at relativistic speeds. The shells punched through their hulls like bullets through paper, each impact sending shock waves through their exotic matter structures. "Direct hit on enemy command vessel," Weapons Officer Ji-hoon reported with grim satisfaction. "Their central hull is breaking apart." Captain Park watched the largest Void Swarm ship begin to crumble under the sustained barrage. Pieces of its reality-warping hull drifted away in slow motion, venting atmosphere and exotic particles into space. The weapon that had destroyed entire star systems was being torn apart by chunks of metal fired from what the galaxy considered a primitive ship. "More enemy vessels approaching from the main formation," Tactical Officer Yeon-soo announced. "I count 200 ships moving to intercept us." "Let them come," Park replied calmly. "Engineering, how are our power levels?" Chief Engineer Dong-hyuk's voice crackled through the ship's communication system from the engine room far below. "Fusion reactors at maximum output. Electromagnetic field generators running hot but stable. We can maintain this rate of fire for another 6 hours. 6 hours of continuous bombardment. The alien commanders listening to the human communications could not believe what they were hearing. Their own ship's energy weapons would overheat after minutes of sustained fire, requiring cooling periods and careful power management. How could this crude human vessel maintain such devastating firepower for so long? The answer lay in humanity's approach to war. While other species had refined their weapons to be efficient and elegant, humans had built theirs to be simple and reliable. The electromagnetic rails were massive constructions of copper and steel, designed to work even when half the ship was destroyed. The shells were manufactured in Earth's orbital factories by the thousands, each one identical and deadly. Incoming transmission from the alien fleet, communications specialist Kyung-ho reported. Admiral Tae-min wants to speak with you, Captain. Put him through, Park ordered, never taking his eyes off the tactical display showing more enemy ships, closing in. The Admiral's voice came through, filled with wonder and disbelief. Captain Park, how are you doing this? Our most advanced weapons could not scratch their hulls. Simple physics, Admiral, Park replied as another volley of shells tore through an enemy destroyer. When you cannot go around a problem, you go through it. The new wave of Void Swarm ships opened fire as they entered range, their reality distortion beams painting space with deadly energy. The attacks struck the Indomitable's hull, tearing away armor plating and punching holes through non-critical sections. But the human ship's design philosophy showed its worth. Redundant systems, multiple backup power sources, and damage control teams that had trained for this exact scenario. Hull breach on decks 4 and 9, damage control specialist Kyung-ho reported. Emergency bulkheads sealed, no critical systems affected. Medical Officer Yoon-ji's voice joined the reports from the ship's medical bay. Casualties from the engineering deck, radiation exposure, and impact injuries. Nothing I cannot handle. The Indomitable shuddered under the enemy fire but continued its deadly work. The electromagnetic rails along its hull pivoted to track new targets, sending streams of metal projectiles into the approaching enemy formation. Each shell carried enough kinetic energy to level a city block, and the ship was firing hundreds of them every minute. Dr. Min-jun studied the enemy's tactical patterns from his science station. The swarm ships are trying to adapt, he reported. They are modifying their hull density and adding ablative layers. Will it work? Park asked. Against energy weapons, yes. Against several tons of metal moving at 30% of light speed? Min-jun smiled grimly. No, the doctor was correct. The Void Swarm's adaptive technology had been designed to counter the sophisticated weapons used by advanced civilizations. It could absorb energy, redirect exotic particles, and neutralize quantum effects. But it had no answer for the simple application of Newton's laws of motion. As the battle continued, more enemy ships joined the fight. The main Void Swarm formation began to turn toward the human vessel, thousands of black ships moving like a dark tide across space. Their combined firepower lit up the void with reality-distorting beams and space-time manipulation weapons. Enemy fleet concentration increasing, Yeon-su announced. We are going to be heavily outnumbered in about 10 minutes. Then we had. Better work fast, Park replied. Weapons, switch to armor-piercing rounds. Target their reactor sections. Ji-hoon's hands moved across his control panel, selecting ammunition specifically designed to penetrate heavy armor. The shells that emerged from the railguns now carried dense tungsten cores surrounded by depleted uranium jackets. They struck the enemy ships like the hammer of an angry god, punching through multiple layers of hull to find the fusion reactors that powered their exotic weapons. The results were spectacular. Enemy ships began to explode from within as their containment systems failed under the kinetic bombardment. Chain reactions rippled through their formations as debris from one destroyed vessel damaged others nearby. But the Void Swarm was learning, even if slowly. Some ships began to maneuver erratically, trying to make themselves harder targets. Others coordinated their fire to overwhelm specific sections of the human ship's defenses. "Direct hit on our starboard railgun battery," Kyung-ho reported. "Electromagnetic coils are offline." "Switch to backup systems," Park ordered. "Chemical propulsion if necessary." The mention of chemical propulsion made the alien observers wonder if they had heard correctly. While they used clean fusion rockets and exotic matter drives, humans still carried weapons that used controlled explosions to fire projectiles. It seemed impossibly primitive until those projectiles began tearing through enemy hulls. "Backup systems online," Ji-hoon confirmed. "Explosive shell launchers ready." The new weapons added their own thunder to the battle. Where the railguns fired sleek metal projectiles, the chemical launchers sent explosive shells designed to fragment after penetrating their targets. The effect inside enemy ships was devastating. Corridors filled with high-velocity metal fragments that shredded everything in their path. Lieutenant Commander So Young monitored the ship's navigation systems as they maneuvered through the growing debris field. "Captain, we are taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Recommend evasive action." "Negative," Park replied firmly. "Hold course. We finish this fight." The Indomitable continued its deadly work, trading armor and hull integrity for enemy kills. More Void Swarm ships exploded under the kinetic bombardment, their adaptive defenses useless against weapons that relied on basic physics rather than exotic technology. But the human ship was paying a price for its aggression. Reality distortion. Beams had carved deep gouges in its hull. Gravity manipulation weapons had twisted entire sections of the superstructure. The elegant weapons of the galaxy's advanced civilizations were crude but effective when applied in overwhelming numbers. "Hull integrity at 60%, Kyung-ho announced. "We are losing structural cohesion in several sections." "Medical bay reports 15 casualties," added Yoonji. "Burns, radiation sickness, and impact trauma. We need to get these people to a proper hospital." Park looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him into this impossible battle. Their uniforms were torn and stained. Their faces showed the strain of hours under enemy fire, but none of them suggested retreat. "How many enemy ships destroyed?" he asked. "Over 400 confirmed kills," Yeonsu replied. "The main formation is pulling back. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Void Swarm was retreating from a battle they had not won. The battle raged for 14 hours without pause. The Indomitable moved through the Void Swarm formation like a wounded but determined predator, its weapons never silent, its crew never yielding. When the electromagnetic railguns overheated, from constant use, backup chemical launchers took over. When those ran low on ammunition, close-range missile pods deployed their deadly cargo. Captain Park had not left his command chair in 10 hours. His uniform was stained with smoke and blood, from a hull breach that had nearly killed them all. Around him, his crew worked with the desperate efficiency of people who knew that stopping meant death, not just for them, but for every living thing in the galaxy. "Status report," he called out, his voice hoarse from breathing recycled air, thick with smoke and metal particles. "Hull integrity at 42%, Damage Control Specialist Kyung-ho reported. "We have lost main power to decks 6 through 9. Emergency systems are keeping life support running." Chief Engineer Dong-hyuk's voice came through the communication system, weaker now but still determined. "We are running on backup fusion reactors. The main cores took a direct hit from one of their reality beams. I have teams working to restore power, but we are operating at 60% capacity." Despite the damage, the human ship continued its deadly work. The weapons that had seemed so primitive to the galaxy's advanced civilizations were proving devastatingly effective against an enemy that had never encountered such direct, brutal force. Medical Officer Yoon-ji moved through the ship's corridors. Like a guardian angel, treating crew members who had been injured by enemy fire or the ship's own violent maneuvers. Her medical bay was full of people with radiation burns, impact injuries, and worse. But she kept them alive and fighting. 23 casualties total, she reported during a brief lull in the battle. 7 serious, but everyone is stable. We are running low on medical supplies and radiation treatment drugs. The toll of the battle showed on every face aboard the ship. These 50 humans had volunteered for what everyone thought was a suicide mission, but none of them had expected to fight for so long against such overwhelming odds. Yet they continued, because that was what humans did. They endured. Dr. Min Jun studied the tactical situation from his science station, tracking the movements of the remaining Void Swarm ships. "The enemy formation is breaking up," he announced with barely contained excitement. "They are retreating toward the dimensional rifts they came from." Through the debris field that had once been the Swarm's main battle group, the surviving black ships fled like shadows running from the dawn. For the first time in their 10,000-year history, the Void Swarm had encountered an enemy they could not adapt to, could not overcome, could not consume. "They are learning," Tactical Officer Yeon-Su observed as she tracked the fleeing enemy. "Vessels. Their ships are trying to modify their hulls to resist kinetic impacts." "Too little, too late," Weapons Officer Ji-hoon replied grimly as he sent another volley of shells after the retreating ships. "You cannot adapt armor to stop that much kinetic energy. Not unless you want to build ships so heavy they cannot move." Thus, truth of his words became clear as the remaining Void Swarm vessels continued to fall under the Indomitable's relentless fire. Their adaptive technology, so effective against energy weapons and exotic matter bombs, had no answer for simple metal projectiles moving at tremendous speeds. As the 14th hour of battle drew to a close, the last enemy ships disappeared through the dimensional rifts that had brought them to this galaxy. Behind them, they left a debris field stretching across several star systems, the remains of what had once been considered the most dangerous force in the universe. The Indomitable floated alone in the void, its hull scarred and smoking, its crew exhausted but victorious. Around them, space was filled with the twisted wreckage of enemy ships, proof that sometimes the oldest solutions were still the best ones. "Captain," Communications Specialist Kyung-ho said quietly, "Incoming transmission from Admiral Tae-min." The alien commander's voice came through the speakers, filled with wonder and disbelief. "Captain Park, the long-range sensors show that the enemy fleet has retreated completely. How is this possible? How did you accomplish what our combined forces could not?" Park looked around his bridge at the crew who had made this victory possible. Their faces were blackened with smoke and pale with exhaustion, but their eyes still held the fierce determination that had carried them through the longest battle of their lives. "Admiral," he replied simply, "sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Other times, you fight it with water. The Void Swarm expected energy weapons and exotic technology. We gave them something they had never seen before." "But how did you know it would work?" Park smiled, thinking of the years of preparation that had led to this moment. "Because humans have been solving problems with kinetic weapons for 50,000 years. We just made them bigger." Dr. Min Jun looked up from his analysis of the battle data. The enemy's adaptive technology was designed to counter the sophisticated weapons used by advanced civilizations, but it had no protocols for defending against simple mass applied with overwhelming force. The explanation was interrupted by a new voice on the communication channel, Ambassador Haeri Kim from the Galactic Council Station. "Captain Park, the Council has been monitoring your battle. The entire galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." "The galaxy does not owe us anything," Park replied. "We did what needed to be done." But privately, he knew this victory would change everything. For 50 years, humanity had been seen as the primitive newcomers to galactic civilization, tolerated but not respected, aided but not valued. That perception would never survive what had happened here. Rescue ships began arriving within hours, drawn by the massive energy signatures from the battle. The first to arrive were the surviving vessels from Admiral Taemin's fleet, their crews, eager to see the ship that had accomplished the impossible. What they found was a battered hulk that barely resembled the sleek vessel that had entered the battle zone. The Indomitable's hull was torn open in dozens of places. Its weapon systems were twisted wreckage. Its crew was injured and exhausted, but it was alive, and its enemy was not. Lieutenant Commander So Young coordinated the rescue efforts as Alien. Medical teams beamed aboard to help with casualties. "The ship is structurally sound," she reported. "We can make it back to a friendly port for repairs." Chief Engineer Dong Hyuk emerged from the engine room covered in oil and radiation burns, but grinning with pride. "The engines are still running. We could fight another battle if we had to." "Let us hope we do not have to," Park replied. But he was smiling too. As news of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and profound. Species that had fought wars for thousands of years suddenly understood that they had been doing it wrong. The elegant weapons they had perfected over millennia were useless against an enemy that could adapt to anything, except the simple application of overwhelming force. Within days, shipyards across the galaxy began retooling their production lines. Energy weapons gave way to kinetic cannons. Exotic matter bombs were replaced by simple explosive shells. The sophisticated art of civilized warfare was abandoned in favor of humanity's brutal but effective approach. The Void Swarm would return someday. Creatures like that always did. But when they came back, they would find a galaxy that had remembered how to fight. They would face not just elegant energy weapons and sophisticated technology, but the thunder of 10,000 cannons firing as one. And at the center of it all would be humanity. The species that had taught the galaxy that sometimes the best way to solve a problem was not with advanced technology or clever tactics, but with a very large hammer applied with great enthusiasm. The Indomitable limped home through hyperspace, carrying 50 heroes who had saved a galaxy by remembering that war was not an art form. It was a job that needed to be done, and humans had always been very good at getting their jobs done.